Here it is, the day some of you have been waiting for. I'm going to walk you through my combine and how it works. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. So I have a Case combine, as you can see back here, and the number is a 7120. It's a 2009 model. It's got about 2,200 engine hours on it and about, I think 16 or 1,700 separating hours. So for those of you that might not understand what I just said there, separating means that there's that many hours I've actually been combining with the mechanisms all engaged to remove grain from the crop. Engine hours are just the time that's spent without the threshing engaged. So driving down the road or driving from field to field and stuff like that. So that's why there's a bit of a difference in engine hours versus separator hours. I'm not gonna lie, this has been a really hard thing for me to do because I'm a very details type of person, and maybe from my videos you can see that. And I'm trying to not get too deep in the weeds on trying to explain how a combine works because there's a lot to it. I've just spent the last 2 hours trying to do this video. And I'm getting really frustrated with myself because I get sidetracked and I talk and talk and talk. And I'm trying to keep it concise and tight on time so that you, at the end of this video, have a pretty good understanding how my combine works. So that when I do videos in the future, or if you watch some past videos, you can maybe understand when I talk about some of the terminology, you can say, aha, I understand that. So I'm gonna try my best to do this. And I'm gonna break it down into, I think, 4 quick, easy steps on how a combine works. And I guess ultimately, at the end of the day, if there's something in this video that catches your eye, or there's something you wanna know more about, leave a comment down below in the bottom of the video. I'll try to answer it the best I can. If I get a whole bunch around certain topics, I'll maybe try to do a video on that. But here, it's just really a base fundamental on how combines work. I've been doing this for a long time now, 30 years. Oh, 30 years. So, a lot of it is really intuitive to me that I take for granted that a lot of people don't know some of the maybe difficulties in setting a combine or the tricks in setting a combine. And really, I've been around them for so long, I have a really good understanding of them. So it's hard for me to explain in a really simple terms because I get, as I said, really detailed. So I'm gonna start with step 1, which is the head on the front of the combine, because without a head, a combine is useless. Okay, behind me is my Drago Series 2 corn head, and I believe, as I said before in another video, it might be Italian. What really makes Drago corn heads, sets themselves apart from other corn heads are the way it pulls the crop into the corn head and how it has self-adjusting deck plates. And I'll explain that quick in a second. But really what this corn head does for me is it pulls the corn stalk down through the row unit, pulls the corn cob off the corn plant. This is what we want. So the job of this header is to take this off the corn plant. And I'll show you quick how it does it. As you can see, I just lifted the snouts and they're triangular. And what these snouts' job here is to help direct the corn row or the corn plant into these row units right here. This is one of them. And they're also there to help lift corn up off the ground if it is lodged or fallen over. So their job is to funnel the corn into these row units. And the job of these row units are to pull the plant in. So if my hand was a corn plant, these chains here pull the corn plant in. And then there's rollers that are rolling in opposite directions, and they actually pull the corn plant down. And by pulling the corn plant down, we have these adjustable deck plates. So mine, as I said, are self-adjusting. And what they are, they're spring-loaded. So they can move back and forth based on the width of the corn plant. And what that does is as the corn plant comes down, it basically, cob hits it and gets left here. And then these chains pull the cob up into the auger, and the auger feeds it into the front of the combine. Okay, we're standing now at the front of the combine where the feeder house is. And the feeder house, the name of the feeder house is pretty good, as its role is twofold. One, it gives us an area to attach a head to up here. So we have the corn head attached. And it also gives us this area here where we actually connect components of the head to the combine so that one, the combine can talk to the head electronically, and two, the combine can give power, through this yellow shaft to drive components on the corn head or components on the draper head that we use for soybeans and wheat. From the back of the combine, there's a shaft from the engine that sends power all the way up to the front, and that's how we get power to drive the roll units on the corn head here. Both our headers, the corn head and the draper head, have header height control. And what header height control is, it's an electronic way of maintaining a certain height all the time. In corn, we like to keep the corn head about a foot off the ground, and we have sensors, 3 of them on the corn head, that send information to the combine and says, I need to be higher or I need to be lower. And that's kind of done through this electrical connection that happens up here. The draper head runs very much the same way. We also have a place for hydraulic components, but my corn head doesn't require any hydraulics. So right now it's just kind of nested in this area and not used, but it always does get connected when we're running the draper head. And you can probably see that in other videos where you kind of see me do this with that connection, and that's where we do a hydraulic connection. The feeder house main role, besides just having the header attached to it, is it's what grabs the crop from the header and puts it into the threshing area on the combine. So along the feeder house is a big chain, and that chain basically is going around and just grabbing the crop material and pulling it up and into the front of the combine, basically right up in here underneath the cab. And that's really kind of the main role of the feeder house. It's also the area where, in other videos you've seen me, I'll drop the stone trap, and there is a little, I call it a beater up there, but it basically will knock stones down into the stone trap, especially when we're doing crops like edible beans or soybeans, where we can get a stone in on the header and it will kind of get up into the feeder house. But that's kind of the role of the feeder house. It's an area to attach the head to and to pull the crop up into the combine. Okay, before I get to the threshing part of the combine, the threshing and separation of the grain from the stover and the chaff, or the residue, whatever you want to call it, I'll just give you a walk around the outside of the combine with a lot of the shields removed and the side panels up, so you can get a better look at some of that stuff around the edge of the combine. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side, or what I would call the driver's side, because it's got the ladder right there that I hop up into to get inside the cab to operate the combine. So we'll start on this side, we'll go along the back, and then we'll go up the other side, and then we'll get into the more details around threshing and separation. So as I said, this is the left-hand side, and this is where the unload auger is. So that auger there is where the grain is unloaded from the combine into a grain cart, wagon, truck, whatever. And that is the grain tank where we store clean grain. So along the side here, you can see it's not too complicated, at least I don't think it is. We got some stuff here that drives the unload system for the grain unload. Over here is kind of the engine and where all the hydraulic components are and lines that go around to drive different parts of the combine. And that there is the guts of the combine, which I'll get into here after I do the walk around. So that's the left-hand side. This is the back of the combine. I got the ladder down. I go up there to put fuel in it, and the engine is right there. So that's kind of where the main power unit for the combine is. And this area back here, even though the ladder's down and there's some shields open, that's where the residue comes out and is spread out the back of the combine. This is the right-hand side of the combine. I talked about fuel. There's the fuel tank. It is a 1,000-liter fuel tank. So when she gets low, she's a hungry beast and takes a while to fill back up with diesel fuel. Up there is just kind of a air screen or a screen to purify the air before it goes in to the engine compartment to cool or get blown across a rad to cool the engine. So it's just a way to kind of keep the dust and debris out of the rad. Along here are some of the cleaning components. This is the tailings area. And this area here is where the clean grain is elevated up to the grain tank. And again, here's some of the guts of the combine. So that is basically a quick walk around of the combine with the shields off and the side panels open. Now comes the really tricky part, trying to explain how the threshing and separation happens. So this is the threshing area, like I said, and this is a concave. And it's basically a cage that's around a rotor. And what the rotor is just a big cylinder that has threshing elements on it. And I'll show you that here in a second. This is the concave, like I said, and since this is a rotor, which is basically a big cylinder that turns, and on the cylinder, there's these different threshing elements. What they do is help remove the grain from the crop with the assistance of these concaves. Now I have a concave removed here right now so you could see the rotor because you can't really see it very well through the concave like here. And then that's the rotor that turns clockwise, and those threshing elements basically work against the crop to remove the grain from the crop residue with the assistance of the concaves. And these are slatted and have holes and gaps in them because we want the grain to fall through as we are threshing it, and the grain's supposed to fall through and the crop residue is supposed to stay within this caged area of the rotor. For me, the simplest way to really explain how the grain is separated from the crop residue is to think of a washing machine, and that agitator that's in the center of a washing machine that kind of goes back and forth, that is used to wash the clothes or to work against the clothes. That would be like the rotor inside my combine here with the threshing elements on it. It's going around agitating the crop to try to get the grain to fall out of the crop residue or to come out of the pods, or for corn to get pulled off the cob. And then the concaves, which are around the cylinder, is a lot like the tub in a washing machine that has all the different holes in it. So when the washing machine spins to get rid of the dirty water, that's a lot like what we're trying to do with the combine, except the dirty water really is the grain we want to keep. And that water that goes through the holes in the tub on a washing machine is just like the holes we have on the concaves behind me. What they do is let the grain out and keeps the crop residue in the rotor area, which keeps going out towards the back of the combine because we don't want it anymore. All we want is the grain out of that process. So this front area here, there, and there, those two kind of areas, that's where the threshing happens, where the crop is removed out of the crop residue, or out of the beans out of the pod, or the corn off the cob. And then the next step behind me right here is where further separation happens, where more of that grain is extracted out of the residue and dropped down into the cleaning area. So threshing, which means corn taken off the cobs, or beans out of pods, or wheat out of the wheat heads. Separation, where the grain, the loose grain is removed from the residue, and the residue keeps going this way, and the loose grain falls down. When setting a combine, there's two critical areas to get a really good grain sample. The first area is the threshing area. We have to make sure that there's a proper gap between the threshing elements and the concaves. So in corn, it's about like this. Soybeans is about the same amount of gap, and then wheat gets a little bit tighter. But you can really affect the grain quality if you have that set too tight because it will damage it. And if you have it set too open, you might not remove all the crop from the crop material, and it ends up as loss at the back of the combine, which is bad. So pretty critical part in here. But basically all you're doing is trying to excite that crop residue to get it to let go of the grain, and then that grain is going to fall down through those openings and grates and drop down into the cleaning area. Now that the grain is removed from the residue, that process through threshing and separation, there's always a little bit of crop material that still falls through those areas, and the grain is not 100% clean yet, so we still have to do some cleaning. So even though it's kind of out of the rotor and out of the threshing and separation area, we have to go through the cleaning process to get clean grain up into the top of the grain tank. Cleaning the grain really has 4 elements to it. There's a pre-sieve, there's a chaffer, and there's a sieve, and then there's air. So I know it's 4 things, but it's really not that complicated. At least I hope it's not too complicated. I'll try to explain it really simple. So the first element before we can do any cleaning is we need to create some wind. And what the wind does, or the air movement, is that it helps create a kind of a floating mat of crop material, which is made up of the grain and a little bit of the crop residue that made it out of the concave and separation area. So right down there in the bottom of the combine is a fan, and that fan turns really fast and creates an air, a lot like a furnace fan. So if you know what a furnace is in a house, or forced air, it's the same principle, where we have a fan that's almost identical, almost looks just like a forced air furnace fan. It's running down there, and it's blowing air up into the cleaning area. And the cleaning area of the combine, basically, from a distance standpoint, starts right about here and goes all the way to the back of the combine. And I'll hop in the back of the combine and show you that. So this is the back of the combine. And what you see here, right, this area here, is where the cleaning happens. So the wind that I just talked about is actually being forced up through these slatted grates that you could see here. And the top one here is called the chaffer. And then there's one underneath it. I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll try to get the flashlight down there. And that one's called the sieve. And way up there is one very similar to this, and that's called the pre-sieve. So as I said, those are the 4 components of the cleaning. We have the fan, which I talked about already, the pre-sieve, the chaffer, and then the sieve that's underneath this one. So the pre-sieve just takes out a little bit of the clean grain, and it goes down to an auger that's underneath the bottom of the combine. So clean grain drops down there, and as I said, this is all kind of balancing like this the whole time, plus there's air blowing up. So it's kind of like a floating mat of material that's coming back here that's shaking up and down. And as that happens, it's kind of going back like this. It's in an oscillation motion at the same time. So it's going up, out, up and out, up and out, then down and in, down and in. So it's kind of doing this. And what that does is it helps kind of, with the help of the wind, it helps kind of shake the grain out of the mat of crop material that it's mixed up with. These grates and fins, along with the wind from the fan, separate the grain from the crop residue and gives me clean grain that goes up into the tank of the combine. Sounds simple, but it's a bit of a complicated process. When we run into dirty samples, we have to play with the adjustment in the gap here. So I can put my finger kind of along there. If we have too much unwanted material, we might tighten it up. If we have too much loss going at the back of the combine, because this is the back here, we would open them up. So we adjust for grain loss at the back of the combine, one of the areas that we adjust for is right here on the chaffer. So this is the cleaning area of the combine, and you know, after the separation, the threshing and separation, this is where the cleaning happens, and I'll show you where the clean grain goes. Well, we're under the combine, and I'm trying to, but basically what you see here is the clean grain falls down to the bottom of the combine, and right there is an auger that goes across the bottom of the combine that goes to the bottom of the clean grain elevator. And then that clean grain elevator, like I said, takes the clean grain up to the grain tank. This here, I said, was the tailings. And the tailings, the best way to explain tailings is that sometimes, even after it goes through the threshing and separation and grain cleaning, sometimes we still have some crop that isn't threshed, or there might be soybeans still left in a pod, or wheat still left in a head, and it needs some further, or needs to be, I guess, further processed or re-threshed. And on my combine, it's done through this tailings mechanism. And what happens is, if it goes over the sieve, so that bottom grate below the chaffer I was talking about at the back of the combine, if it goes, doesn't fall through that grate, it ends up going into the tailings system, and that tailings system basically re-threshes the crop and then puts it back up into the cleaning process again to try to get any grain that could be salvaged out of that unthreshed material. And basically that little fin there is where it comes back into the combine and can go through that whole cleaning process all over again. Now that we got the grain cleaned and transported to the top of the combine into the grain tank, we still have one thing we got to deal with, and that's the residue. And that basically, there's two areas in which the residue comes from. The main part of the residue comes from the back of the rotor after it's gone through the threshing and separation process. And then we also have, which is called chaff, and that is basically the stuff that goes over top of the chaffer that's in the back of the combine. So that top graded slat, any material that doesn't fall through there goes straight out the back of the combine as well. So those are the two areas that we have to deal with residue, and I'll give you a quick overview on how that happens. So to deal with the crop material that comes out of the rotor, we have to deal with this device back here, and I'll try to focus in on it. There. That's the chopper, and it basically turns really fast in soybeans and wheat because we want to actually kind of cut up the residue. And in corn, we run it slow because we're not putting much residue at the back, just basically some cobs and some husk and a little bit of plant material. So not a lot, so we don't need to run it as fast. So basically, it grabs the crop out of the back of the rotor and flings it fairly fast to the back of the combine. Where I have the camera right now is basically an area where it would hit the back wall of the combine, and then it drops down and goes into some spinners. But that's how we deal with the material that comes out of the back of the rotor. And that's just kind of a better view of the chopper itself. You can see there's some pretty aggressive blades on it. So as I said, we got the two areas to deal with crop residue. We just talked about the rotor and the chopper. The chaffer is right there, so that material kind of bounces out of the back of the combine. And this is where the two materials will meet. The stuff out of the chopper that hit the back of the combine will drop down on here. And then the stuff that comes out of the back on the chaffer also comes here, and then they drop down into these two spinners. The goal of those two spinners is to spread the harvesting width of the combine. So in corn, with an 8-row head, we're only combining 20 feet. So we're just trying to spread the material across a 20-foot width so they don't spin very fast. In soybeans and in wheat, we want to try to spread the residue the width of the draper head, which is 30 feet. So these are spinning a fair bit faster to try to get the material kind of spread evenly the width of the header. So that we have a nice kind of even residue management kind of at the back of the combine, which makes for planting crops into it the following year a lot nicer. So that's kind of how we deal with the residue out the back of the combine. Okay, we're up in the engine compartment here, right behind me, right there. Engine. And that is the power plant of the combine. And if it doesn't work, nothing works. But that rarely happens, or it probably never really happens. Knock on wood. So, we don't have to do much up here. Usually, all it does is drive all the components of the combine. I gotta watch my head, it's a little high up here. And I gotta watch out for that ceiling fan. Anyways, this is where the final product ends up. This is what we want. This is where the clean grain goes. And that basically auger that you see right there, it takes the corn from the clean grain elevator on the right side of the combine and just puts it into the grain tank and keeps putting it in until I get an alarm on the combine that says it's full. So some people have asked what the inside of the grain tank looks like and how it empties. So I'm going to try to explain that right now. As I already said, that the grain comes up here and basically piles up in the grain tank here. And at some point we have to empty it because it gets full. And if you see right there, there's two kind of strips of corn on top of covers. And underneath those covers are two augers. And I'll show you that here right now. So when I want to unload the combine, I hit a button in the cab and it engages the unload system. And as I said, underneath these covers are augers. And there's two of them, one there, one there. And they move the grain along the bottom of the grain tank to the right side. And even though you can't see it, there's an auger here that goes up. And it's basically a vertical auger that lifts the corn up out of a depression in the grain tank that these two augers dump into. That auger augers it up, dumps into the unload auger. And when I talk about those four augers turning on, that chain right there and all those different sprockets that it goes around, that is what drives the four augers. Also, when I talk about that vertical auger, that's that one right there. So that auger right there is what those two cross augers dump into. Okay, some people have asked to see the inside of my combine. So this is it. It's filthy. My apologies. I'm not maybe the best at cab hygiene, but it is what it is. But I think what people really want to see is all my different control stuff for setting the combine and running the combine on my, I guess you could call it a command arm or whatever, my pilot seat, my operator station, I don't know. There's lots of things you can call it. So yeah, I'll pop up out of the seat here so I can give you a better view and I'll explain a few things to you. So first things first, basically this handle here is my speed control. My combine's a hydrostat, means that basically it's hydraulically driven. It's kind of like a lawnmower. If people have kind of lawnmowers that you use a little pedal to go faster or slower, not really a gas pedal, but I don't know, it kind of makes that whine. I don't know, but basically forwards and back, and that basically is how I change the speed of the combine. So all the way forward is as fast as it goes, kind of in the center there is neutral, and then if I want to go backwards I pull it back, and that's kind of how I go forward and backwards with the combine. And speed is adjusted here with the transmission settings. We have 4 gears. In the field we operate in 2nd gear, and that seems to work for us pretty good. On the joystick here, you can see that there's some buttons. Those are probably the functions we use most when we're operating the combine in the field. Right here is that little kind of triangle, drops the header fur automatically. So when I talked about the auto header height control, if I press that button, it lowers the head to a preset level. And when I want to raise it, there's a button on the back, and I just hit it again and it'll lift it up. So it's all kind of done that way. Here is just some of the different ways we can adjust the head, and this as well. This button here will swing the auger out to unload the grain from the grain tank, and then it will swing it back in. So that's how I kind of move that auger in and out. And then this button here is the one I would press to unload the grain out of the grain tank. So when Sandy's got the buggy beside the combine, I press that button, it turns on the unload, and those 4 augers start and unloads grain out of the grain tank. So those are, as I said, the most used functions, and that's why they're on that handle. So not only do I adjust speed with it, but I also run the head with it as well. So on the controls here that are on the side of the seat, this is the throttle for the engine. So when we're running or we're combining, we are full throttle. You can hear it click when we know we're full throttle. So that just basically gives the combine, takes it from idle all the way up to full power. When I talked about the gap on the sieves and the chaffer, I can adjust them right there. And then the speed, I want those discs to spin the residue out behind the back of the combine, can be adjusted with that button there. The wind, or how much air we have coming out of the fan, is adjusted there. Clearance of the concaves is right here, and then the speed of the rotor is there. Other than that, there's some header adjustments there, and probably some of the most important things here is the parking brake. And then when I want to engage the combine, that button here, if I just click it forward, that would engage the threshing, and then the one beside it, if I put it forward, that would engage the head. So that's basically just kind of some of the stuff that's on the side here that I use to adjust the settings on the combine and engage the threshing and engage the head. And we do have 4-wheel drive on this combine, or I guess you could call it rear wheel drive. The back wheels of this combine do have hydraulic motors on them, and that if we get into tough conditions, we can engage this button here and it will send oil to the drives on the back wheels, and they will spin and turn just like the front wheels. So that helps when we have a little tougher field conditions. Lucky enough, I haven't ever really used it much, and that's a good thing. One thing I should mention is that this is my yield monitor. So this is a display that kind of shows me moisture and yield and does a map at the same time. So that's kind of up there. And I think lastly, there's just a few settings up here. Nothing major. Lights, mirrors, and climate control. So that covers the inside of the combine cab. Really, to me, it's quite simple because I'm so used to it. But if you have any questions about some of the controls, let me know. As I said, I'll try to answer them. If everything is working well and Mark's done a good job setting the combine, hopefully we take this and turn it into this out the back. These little gold nuggets into the grain tank. So at the end of the day, a combine is simple but complex, and trying to explain it as simple as I can was really difficult for me because I don't know how simple to make it or how in-depth I should make it. So hopefully you learn something out of this process. As I said, this is kind of how my combine works. Not all combines are like this, but most case combines that are considered a flagship model, which would be a model like mine, that's the principles of how this works. You know, if you have any questions or comments about the video, please put them down in the comments below and I'll try to answer them for you. But with that, hopefully I informed you on how a combine works. And if I didn't, then I know that I'm a better farmer than a teacher. With that, see you in the next video.